All right, welcome to the Truversion Rental Podcast. This is your destination for anything and all things related to short-term rental Airbnb arbitrage. I'm your host, Jamal Lawson, and I'm thrilled to bring you guys this podcast today and embark on this journey. Whether you are a seasoned veteran in the short-term rental industry, or you're just getting started, or you're in the middle of your process, this is going to be for you. We're going to give you valuable insights, strategies, and success tips in the short-term rental industry. So each week, we're going to dive into a interview-style discussion with like-minded individuals who are either striving and thriving in the industry or just getting started and want to get some more information. So I'm excited today to interview my first guest and have a dynamic dialogue conversation. Please welcome Sandra McEwen. Sandra is out of Tampa, Florida, and she is recently in the short-term rental industry. She bought her first home at the end of 2022, and she is a retired from the pharmaceutical industry and decided to join the entrepreneurship journey and embark on that journey and decided to get into short-term rental. So I'm excited to talk about that today. Sandra, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Jamal, for having me on. This is really fun to be on a podcast, and it's my first time being on a podcast. So it's interesting, fun, and gets me out of my comfort zone, which is great. And I'm really excited to chat with you. And I've been excited about following you since we met not too long ago. We were in a midterm or short-term midterm virtual meetup group. And I knew as soon as you started talking, you're just super focused and really determined with your goals and your path to your goals. And it seems like all things lead back to that. And what you created with arbitrage is amazing and super successful. So I'm glad to be on your journey and listen.
I appreciate that, Sandra. I appreciate that. Likewise to you. And like I said, it's just about, I'm glad that we got to connect because, entrepreneurship and life is about connecting and meeting people and seeing how we can each bring value to each other. So it's been good, and I'm glad we can continue to connect. So let's talk about, let's dive into you and your journey and your background. And I know that you're in the short-term rental industry. Let me ask you this, and a lot of people probably want to know, you were in the pharmaceutical industry for 26 years, and then you decided to transition to entrepreneurship, right? That's a big jump, right? So talk about that, why entrepreneurship? Why real estate? What was your reason?
Yeah, so my journey is a little different. I was a pharmacist for 28 years, and I ended up managing some properties that were my dad's after he passed away at the end of 2020. Okay. And so through that process, just started really being immersed in contractors and renovating and real estate transactions, even landlording. We even had an eviction. And so my sister one day just said, hey, she proposed the idea, why don't we just start our own business and buy some of our own properties? Mm-hmm. And it was music to my ears because I was ready to make a change and had been looking for another career path. And I loved the idea of real estate, got the whole bug with Bigger Pockets and YouTube, and just was excited to do that. So we kind of jumped in, opened our LLC, and then bought that first property, that single family home outside of Atlanta. And I'm in Tampa. Gotcha. So everything was remote.
Right. So your first property was remote. That's right. I don't know if I would technically recommend that for your first property, but you you dove in. So you're in Tampa. Your property, I believe, is outside of Augusta, Georgia, right?
Well, I had the first property, the single family home, was outside of Atlanta. And then, we started looking for other markets, and I kind of fell upon learning about midterms through a group called the Wire Group. It's Women Investing in Real Estate, and went to a retreat and started learning about one of their niches, which is midterm rentals. And I just love the idea of that because being a medical professional and being the idea of having that strategy of providing housing, safe, nice, comfortable housing for professionals really appealed to me. So we
talk about
started with Augusta.
Right. Talk about that mindset though. Like why for you bought your property, your single family property, you could have rented it out long term. Why did you decide to go midterm rental versus long term rental?
I think I just really like the idea that I connected with, providing that housing for traveling professionals. And that is something, I had always kind of, knew about some of the medical hubs in Georgia. I went to school in Atlanta. So I knew Augusta had a large medical hub there. And so everything just started to connect. And then I just decided, to be frank, I really just at some point just said I have to choose something. And so let's just choose this strategy and we are going to put up our blinders on everything else because the shiny penny syndrome of a million things that we can do, So that's what happened. Just stayed on track with doing that. And then I realized I could short term in the gaps.
Right. And so yeah, I mean, shiny object syndrome for sure. Like there's so many, especially in entrepreneurship, like if you decide to get into entrepreneurship after the workforce, you have that mindset of like, oh, this is a good idea. Oh, this is a good idea. Right. Yes. So we all have that. I've been through that. So it's like really narrowing down like, okay, there's so many strategies. If you buy a property, there's so many strategies for rental, long-term, short-term, midterm, right? And even, what I do with arbitrage, you don't even have to buy the properties to activate the cash flow strategy of midterm or short-term, right? So I know you guys decided to do the buy the properties. And for the people that don't know, midterm rental typically is when a guest, right, medical professional, corporate professional is probably your target market. They can stay at your property for typically it's more than 28 days. It would be considered a midterm, right? Anywhere from 28 days, depending on your market, to 2, 3, 4 months at a time. So you saw the value in, hey, like you can get this property occupied for 3, 4 months at a time. Well, this benefits for what benefits do you think come with that?
For the property owner, the investor,
for the investor,
sure, it's just a little bit more hands off than maybe doing short term, which definitely appealed to me. Having people come in and out every couple of days remotely was a little more daunting for me to think about. Not having a team necessarily. I think we bought the properties and then then started to gather our team. So definitely, I knew we could midterm there, and short term was definitely going to be something maybe down the road. We could do that once we kind of mastered, or at least were able to manage ourselves, and we stabilized the properties. We could do some short term. Yeah, and long term is obviously. So what I learned from the property in Atlanta, the single family, is just the cash flow is just not there. With the rates and the mortgage. So they're great assets for long term and they're stable. So we bought a duplex first, and that is our anchor long-term rentals. And then we bought a quadplex, which we rolled out. We furnished all 4 units and rolled that all out as midterm. Kind of all at once. So it's definitely an adventure and a big undertaking.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely an experience, right? I'm sure you're going through lots of things you learned and challenges, right? So I would want to know short-term rental, right? So you got the long-term with the duplex, you got the quad now, and you've furnished that. You you're using it as the midterm rental, your primary strategy. How are you incorporating short-term? And I know it's not just midterm. How do you incorporate short-term with your midterm units?
Yeah, so trying to maximize profits definitely helps to be able to do short term in the gaps, because you can't realistically have someone move out and have another person move in the same day. every
Right.
single turnover for
Right.
3 months plus. And sometimes I'll get people for 7 months, but sometimes I might have 1 month,
Mhm.
so in between, really just I'm still learning that. I'm definitely not an expert at that. It's really learning what the price points are. So it's almost it's just a different strategy, going in and being able to flex and figure out what should I be pricing it at? What should my cleaning fees be? How do I make it attractive to do that? And also, I'm not really equipped to have people coming in and out. So I don't have a cleaning team that's
Mm.
busy all the time.
Right.
So I also have to be cognizant of that fact that, I have to make sure everyone is able to
Right.
do that. I don't have a ton of units yet, where I can move people around and keep them busy. So
Right. No, that's a good point. And the fact that I think the kudos to you for making that decision, because it's a lot. It could be a lot of stress and anxiety in the beginning, right? Especially if you're doing anything remote. Like myself, I chose not to go remote because when I started out, I was like, okay, like I'm going to have to be hands on. I
mhm.
primarily do short term with a midterm strategy. I'm going to primarily do short term, but
Yeah,
you were able to go remote, right? And you use short term. And what I mean by short term tenants is in the gap. So if you have if you have a tenant that stays for 3 months, there might be a 2 week break or a few days break, right? You can use the short term rental strategy, meaning book somebody for 2, 3, 4, 5 days or longer in between your next guest, right?
exactly. Yeah,
Right.
I could have someone for 2 days and then maybe another person for a week.
Right.
It's a balancing act, and I have to be a little cautious because I'm remote.
Yeah.
I can't. It's commitment once you accept that request to
Right.
stay on Airbnb.
Right.
You do need
Right.
to be ready to roll, and that
Right.
you can make it happen. So
Totally agree. There needs to be, if you're anybody that wants to go remote, like you need to have the systems. I wouldn't recommend, particularly with short term, right? You need to be able to have those systems down, know like, how to manage, have a team in place. Like if I were to go to remote, I would at least be there at that location for 4 to 6 weeks to make sure like everything's good, everything's set up, hire a team, somebody that you trust, cleaning team, handyman, you know, uh, have some eyes on the property because it's tough that way. But
yeah.
you maximizing your calendar. So that's great, right? Midterm client, less hands-on. Midterm clients, tenants, less hands-on, less management. Short term in the gap, so you're maximizing your calendar so you can get the most revenue for your investment. So I want to kind of go back, like, what thoughts or challenges did you have, and or any fears or when you left the industry, so your workforce, pharmaceutical industry, to go into short-term rental, mid-term rental, entrepreneurship? Did you have any challenges, fears, anxieties?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's scary a little bit. It's definitely a tall order. It's not as easy as it seems, when people are on, YouTube and saying, real estate, you can grow your portfolio in, a year and you can have 50 units or something. I mean, it's just, or doing short term,
Yeah.
is the best strategy. Rem- for me, coming from pharmacy, I think I was a very detailed person. Just, that's how you are, that's how you're
Mm-hmm.
trained, to almost, you have to be perfect, all the time. And with real estate, I have definitely struggled with that a little bit in terms of, sometimes getting it done is more important than being perfect. And so I've had to really uh, adjust how my mind is wired in
Mm-hmm.
terms of my work now. And I'm also at home. I don't have a schedule. I can do whatever I want. I've got to motivate myself. And that's one really nice thing about, interacting with you and other investors, trying to do that, trying to build a connection
Mm-hmm.
and a network of people that I can go to when I have issues. Because it's a whole new industry to be in, and it's serious too. You're providing housing for people. You do need to know what you're doing. You need to housing that's safe, and there's legalities and just other things, but not getting, knowing that whatever comes your way, you will have resources and you have people that you can go to, and you will be able to figure out what to do, and not to get too overwhelmed by the big picture, and just keep moving forward
Oh yeah.
in little steps and chip
Yeah.
away at it.
Yeah, chip away. No, for sure. And you said something like, what's the saying? Done is better than perfect, right?
Yeah.
Particularly, in this industry, entrepreneurship, real estate, getting it done and then figuring out, okay, cool, I need to fix this, I need to fix this. But if you can get it done and get started, then you know what to fix, right?
Yeah, sometimes you just have to take that leap. It's just not all going to be exactly right. It's just
Exactly.
not, and sometimes you got to take on some risk, and you'll figure out who you are. Are you a person that likes to take on a lot of risk and you're willing to accept that, or you just not, you don't want to take on as much risk, but you maybe partner with people that balance you out? You start to understand your personality, and just do the best that you can.
Right.
But definitely it's a little more risky. It can be a lot of money. It's a lot of other people's money.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
investing. It's investing, right? If regardless if you're buying or renting properties for short term and midterm, it's still, there's always risk management. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that you took that jump, took that risk, and obviously there's some challenges in transitioning. But I mean, you're here now. You have a total of how many units do you have?
I have 7 units, so over 3 properties.
Good, 3 properties that you own, 7 units, and you're doing midterm and short term in there. So what's the goal for you? Like, obviously you're with your strategy. Where do you see yourself down the line? 3-4 years from now with the business.
So I think the more immediate goal is just to continue to stay on track with this strategy and grow the portfolio by collaborating with other people, looking into other markets, maybe creating this repeatable process, and sticking with so I'm in the kind of the small multifamily space with midterm / short-term rental hybrid. Continue with that model. I do enjoy it, so that's good. I'm in a strategy that I like, which is great for a second career path. And then I'd like to, definitely try to grow our profits and really streamline our expenses and learn how to maximize our business, to the optimal level. And that's where, now that I'm buying properties, now I can start to do that and really dig in and start to see, okay, over a year, what does it look like? And try to get some more properties definitely this year of the same type, same asset class, and learn to maybe what other, business strategies can help me, maybe like arbitrage. How does that complement our business model, and what we're doing? And so, yeah, and learning about, I've learned about people renting by the room, and potentially would we grow and maybe get larger apartment complexes is also something. So continuing on the same path, and then potentially branching out into some other asset classes and learning some other strategies. So all over the place.
All over, yeah. Everything, right?
Yeah.
No, I got it. That's good. So you're that sounds very ambitious, which is good. So you have a strategy that works for you and your model, which I would encourage anybody to if you're going to get into short-term rentals, like there's several strategies you can go into. You can buy houses or single family homes. You can buy apartment buildings, and you can use short-term rental as a strategy, because short-term rental is just the cash flow income strategy. You could use midterm, you can use a combination. And you said you're open to other strategies or models, right? So there's in the perfect world, owning it, I believe if you own properties and you want to operate them as a short-term rental, midterm rental, perfect. A great way to how arbitrage comes into play with that, a great way to get a faster return on your cash flow right, and increase your cash flow, because with properties, you're looking at rates, you're looking at the mortgage, you're looking at the property, you're looking at the, there's a lot of things that get into it, debt, whatever however you're going to access the cash. The benefit of arbitrage is the ability to scale, right? And so I use arbitrage to grow a business that scales, like accumulation of cash, so that I can invest into assets like single family homes or whatever asset class, apartment buildings that I want to invest in. But arbitrage is simply finding a property that you can rent. So as you have a duplex or a quadplex, you can find a quadplex that's in a good, location, and you can rent all 4 units, right? And you'll be able to get in for a lower cost of entry and probably have the same cash flow as you have on buying it. So as you're looking for a home, you could still be increasing your cash flow by using the arbitrage model. I would recommend that to anybody. But what questions do you have about the arbitrage model? Or I know you had some questions for me. How can I help you, serve you as far as your goals?
Yeah, I love the idea of arbitrage, because I think, at some point you're always looking for you're looking for a cash flow so that you can continue to grow portfolios and gain assets, have what do they call it? Like wealth. You want to grow your net worth, and you want to, at the end of it, you want to have assets. But what I love about arbitrage and what you've done is you've just grown this into a business that is, very successful. So you almost have something that you can sell that, like you have a business model. You've created something that is a true business, that has this consistent, cash flow. Because what would I do to get that? I can obviously go in partnerships and I can use other people's money, but I can also, what's a lot of people flip houses, I could arbitrage. So I love that. That is a way for us to continue to grow our profits, and we can buy assets with that. And it really aligns with what I'm already doing.
Yeah. And that's why I was like, and that's the thing. It's already aligned. So like we were talking about, like, shiny object syndrome, right? Mm-hmm. And so I had the same thing. I was like, okay, like what can I, with the arbitrage model, it's the same concept, the same thing you're doing with midterm and short term, right? You could even midterm, let's say you found a property that like is a good midterm rental location. It's by hospitals, it's by, military bases, there's workforce in the area. But maybe for some situation, you don't want to buy that property. But you can talk to the landlord and rent that property and then still do your midterm strategy, right? So you could use arbitrage for midterm strategy first. So you have this, so you're not changing your whole business. You have the same strategy, midterm, filling in the gap for short term, but you're arbitraging these units. And now you're able to get maybe 3 to 4 or 5 units in a year versus maybe you buy only 2 houses.
Yeah, right. And that actually helps my issue of, my cleaning team. I give them, they have more properties. We have more, properties in the area that we can provide for maybe insurance housing or, corporate housing, more of a network, right? I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and said, do you have anything available? And I just have the quadplex, and I said, no. And they say, well, can you let me know when you have another furnished unit available? Or even with the duplex, when I've had openings or vacancy there, I've had people say, can you furnish it for me? Or do you know of a furnished property? So it definitely works hand in hand. And I definitely think that it complements what I'm doing. So
yeah, the more units, the better. Right, especially for your staff, right? And you were talking about, I think one of your questions was related to maximizing your income, but minimizing your expenses. So one way that I would recommend that I found to minimize expenses is the more units, the better. Because if you have 10 units or 20 units, now, like you said, your biggest expense is your cleaning is cleaning fees, right? Still an expense. And if you can consolidate those, right? So if you have now you have a cleaner or two, and you can give them work, right? So you have 10 properties. So now they have work. They're more loyal to you. They're more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
You can manage the cost, and they can maybe clean 3 properties, 4 properties in a day versus maybe now they're showing up for one. So now they're cleaning another property for somebody else. They're cleaning another property for somebody else. And they're now they're not as loyal to you. So I think you hit on a good point. One
Yeah,
of the benefits
definitely.
to growing faster is that you can control your expenses with the people that work for you.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that is definitely something that I strive for. I think let me look at some of my questions that I had.
Sure.
So we covered that, the minimizing expenses. Okay, here's one. So what areas does it make sense to arbitrage in, and what areas would it not make sense? How do you, if let's say you're going to start looking at other markets,
Mhm.
you have several markets where you live, where
Mhm.
you arbitrage. So what do you look for in the markets?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So where would it make sense to arbitrage, right? And so the thing about arbitrage is the margin that is can be different than buying, right? So it needs to the biggest thing is looking and doing your market research is the biggest thing for arbitrage. Where I've made mistakes and where I see a lot of people make mistakes is maybe jumping into a property just because, oh, like it looks good, right? So the biggest thing is like location, and then just what's the existing data? Like how are other short-term rentals doing? So I always look for like comparables to that confirm my intuition. Like, hey, this is a good location. People are traveling here. So I like inner cities because there's always a workforce, right? Even if it's a Midwest city, versus like people think Miami, huge city, right? But there's a lot of supply, there's a lot of demand, right? There's a lot of competition here. But if you're in a Midwest city,
Right.
there's still a lot of travel. Like people are traveling. So I look at that. I look at where there's hotels. I mean, people like hotels not gonna put up a hotel if there's not people that if there's not a demand. I like to get on Airbnb and see the supply and demand, and then find existing short-term rentals. That's the biggest thing. If you can find 2 to 3 existing short-term rentals that you can tell are performing, that gives you peace of mind. It gives you something to compare it to. It gives you something to compete with and say, okay, how can I do this, but maybe do it better, if that makes sense. Then
Yeah.
the biggest thing is rent, right? If what's the rent? What are the average rent in that market? If the rent's so outrageously high and we can't confirm that we can double the revenue, for example, like I won't take a property if you can rent a property for 1,500, you better be able to bring in 3,500, 4,000, right? On most months to be able to confirm that, right? You don't want to rent a property for 1,500 and only confirm, oh man, it's only going to do 2,500. There's not enough margin there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So if
Yeah.
a property is rented 2,000, I need to be able to bring in 4,000. Right.
Okay.
So that's the biggest thing I would tell you when you're going to get your arbitrage units is really, really know what your rent and utilities or probably your fixed expenses. You already know your cleaning fees. And then you just need to know and confirm what you can bring in revenue wise based on your short term and midterm strategy.
Okay. Thank you. That's great. So at least twice the long-term rent,
Yeah, at
at
least
least at a minimum.
at a
Okay.
minimum. Because you don't get
Okay.
the benefits of appreciation. Right. There's other reasons to buy a property, but for arbitrage, it has to cash flow.
Yes.
And then you
Gotcha.
want to consider all seasons too.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
Great.
So I think we got time for one more question.
Okay.
And, um,
So how does arbitrage, sometimes I get a little mixed up with arbitrage and co-hosting.
mhm.
And property management is then just where they're just doing everything.
Yeah, good
So
question. So
yeah.
property management is like, property management where they manage the property for, you know, like a long-term rental. If co-hosting is like on Airbnb or VRBO, whatever platform you have as a short-term rental platform, you can have because if you run a short-term rental property, you're a host. And so let's say in your case, you want to scale, but maybe you're in markets where you're not there and you want to hire a co-host, right? Or maybe you want to co-host with somebody else, meaning they have a property that is a short-term rental, but they don't have the time to manage it. They don't have time to do guest communication, pricing, hire revenue management. You would hire a co-host. So a co-host is kind of like, I call it operational management, not property management, but you're managing the operations because it's a hospitality business. So you can co-host properties, and then you typically negotiate a revenue share with that property owner or landlord.
Okay.
So that's another way that you can increase your cash flow and maybe buy properties by maybe using your leveraging your skills you learn to help somebody else and increase your business.
Yeah. So co-hosting is mostly not a hands-on. You're just you can do it remotely, and it's mostly operational communication, pricing, running the platforms.
If you have the systems in place, if you can communicate, if you have the guest communication system in place, if you can design and stage and set up, and you can orchestrate the channel communication, the channel management, pricing. If you could do it remotely and you have the systems in place, absolutely. If you don't have the system in place, you want to do it locally until you have the automated system in place to do it remotely, you could do it like that.
Okay.
So I love co-hosting. I do co-host a couple properties. And co-hosting is good and for certain reasons, and arbitrage is good for certain reasons as well. Co-hosting is kind of a way to leverage your skills that you developed, and arbitrage can grow your business.
Okay. Gotcha.
Does that answer your question?
Great. Yeah, it does. I definitely see how both of those could complement my business, and there's a lot of overlaps there. And just having the network with other investors in the area and being able to maybe help them, when they can't run businesses. So that's just, it'd be nice to have those other offerings and be able to do them when I need to, or when someone needs a property. And I can say, well, this person has a long-term rental, maybe I could, arbitrage that, or, someone's got a short-term rental that maybe I could do midterm in, and I could co-host it, for someone. Yeah.
Maybe you already got a few properties in Georgia. Like maybe there's a property next door. Like, hey, you know what? This is a good property. Maybe I want to arbitrage it. Or maybe like you see a property, like people know you in that area and they have properties, but they don't have time for it. They have another business. You're already working in that area. So you can
exactly.
You can co-host.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that would,
even though I'm not there, I can do it. Yeah.
What?
Even though I'm not there.
Yeah, even though you're not there. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it helps you though. Like sometimes when you take on, like for me, like I learn more by taking on, what I mean? Learn more by taking on more, for sure.
Got to challenge yourself and grow. I mean, and sometimes that might be not having an asset per se. You might, I did have someone that was in the military that was going to be gone for a year. And he was asking me, can you help me with my property? And we were trying to work through what that would look like, So yeah, definitely want to be able to execute those strategies for sure.
Yeah, so I'm excited. I'm excited. Do you think that helps you? You think if you execute those strategies that could help you in the grow your business? Yeah,
I think having all those in your toolbox and being able to say and just helping people solve their problems. Investors. If everybody's working together, I really love that about just being in Augusta is a little bit, even though it's a big city, a little bit smaller. We can, you get to know a lot of the investors, and if there's people that, we can share, contacts. I have someone that needs housing, and know what's going on with people. It would be nice to have, be able to do that. And maybe at some point I'm not going to want to manage, my properties anymore. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And then, like you said, just being able to bring in more revenue, is key to grow long term. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's all helpful.
Yeah. No, you can do it for sure. So I'm excited for your journey in 2024 and see how you continue to grow. I love the Augusta market with the Masters. I'm a golf fan, so you have a benefit to that. So, what if you had to give a 30-second tip for anybody that was kind of like in your situation? Maybe they're tired of their career, or they want something to do entrepreneurial after their career, or simultaneously. What 30-second tip or recommendation would you give them?
I would say, start learning and talk to a lot of other experts in the field. Start to surround yourself with people that are doing things that you might want to do. And don't be afraid to ask them for help. You might ask 10 people, to talk something out with you, and you might get one person that will say yes. But, do that. Like, I mean, I've reached out to a lot of investors, and you and I, we connected. That doesn't always happen. And just start to go down the path, but remember that at some point you have to pick, and don't get caught in that analysis paralysis. Just get on board with a strategy and not get too overwhelmed by the big picture, and just keep breaking it down and chunking it out and moving forward through those steps, and it will happen.
Absolutely. No, you're good at reaching out and connecting, and I think that's why you're successful now, and you're going to continue to be successful for what you're doing. So this has been great. Thank you for joining this conversation with me. I like to call it a conversation. And we went back and forth as far as your business and including short-term and mid-term rentals. So this is a wrap for today's episode, today's podcast. I hope everybody has enjoyed this conversation. Hope it brings you guys any value. If you like this content, subscribe. You can hit the like button, comment below as well. Give us some feedback. This would be great for me to know how to cater more content that can help everyday people learn about the short-term rental, Airbnb, arbitrage industry. We appreciate your feedback. Sandra, I appreciate you. And thank you guys for joining today's episode. Thank you.
Thank you.